I preach to you in the name of one God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So, there's this guy. Let's call him Alan. When I first met Alan, he was in his late 50s, and he had been working at the seminary for over 40 years, washing dishes. And every year, Alan picked out one or two big brothers. See, Alan has special needs, and even though he was an older man, he still liked to have people take care of him and treat him like a child. And in my first year of seminary, he picked me to be his big brother. People interpreted this role in many different ways. I know that my predecessors would do things like take him out to baseball games and occasionally get him pizza or ice cream. But these relationships all followed similar patterns, and they rarely lasted more than a year or so. See, Alan had no sense of boundaries and would constantly push the envelope and get people to do more and more and more for him, and his big brothers would do more and more and more until it became too much. They would eventually have to distance themselves from Alan, and he would eventually find someone else to fill their place. Now, considering seminaries are full of people eager to help and people who are in constant need of affirmation, and filled with people with absolutely no boundaries, Alan never had a problem finding people to fill this role. Alan was kind of a beloved but controversial figure on campus, and everyone seemed convinced that they had a grasp of what was really going on with him. The newer students quickly saw an opportunity to serve a person in need and would go out of their way to help Alan. This would sometimes escalate to the absurd, where Alan would have people tie his shoes for him, even though he was completely capable of doing this himself. The students who had been around a while longer would apply things they were learning in class to this situation. And there would be heated debates during dinner about boundaries and if students were making Alan dependent on them for help. Regardless of the person's attitude toward Alan, it was clear that most people were making Alan about themselves rather than about Alan. Those who were all too eager to help valued the experience of helping someone in need, but they usually did not take the time to get to know him in order to understand what he was and what he was not capable of doing. Those who were disillusioned with him were no better. They realized that Alan was asking for help when he did not actually need the help, and they were quick to point out how helping Alan could be toxic rather than helpful. But just like their counterparts, they did not put forth the effort to go beyond the facade that Alan was putting up to really get to know him and understand what he was about. Their thoughts about Alan and how to minister to him really had nothing to do with Alan. Instead, they were projecting their own struggles and ideas onto him, regardless of whether or not they applied. Once again, we were all too quick to come to a conclusion and so reluctant to wrestle with ministry and get to the bottom of this difficult relationship. This week, we see a very cryptic passage from Genesis, and it is one of my favorites. We see Jacob take his family and everything he owns, and he sends them across a river. And while he was waiting on the other shore, this ambiguously divine figure begins wrestling with Jacob. They wrestle through the night, and Jacob eventually gets the upper hand until this strange figure dislocates his hip. And in the midst of this pain and struggle, Jacob and the figure have this very mysterious exchange. The figure renames Jacob Israel because he has striven with men and with God and prevails. And just to make things really confusing, the figure does not even offer an explanation as to what this means. And he leaves without even giving his name. What strikes me most about this passage is about what is left out. We are really not given the mysterious figure's identity. Is he God? Is he an angel? Is he just a representative of God? We don't know. And we don't know why Jacob stayed on the shore alone, even though his family was on the other side of the river. Maybe he was expecting to wrestle with God that night. Or maybe he just needed some alone time. We don't know. What we are given is this narrative of a struggle between the divine and humanity. And in the end, humanity's reward is identity. Jacob wrestled with the figure, but the figure, unable to escape, Jacob's hip dislocated, the match seemed to end in stalemate. However, it does not seem to matter who won. It was Jacob's persistence in his match with God, that he was finally told that he was Israel and that he would carry on his family's legacy. Many of us have probably found ourselves in similar wrestling matches, where we are not quite sure who we are struggling with, but we have a hunch that these struggles have something to do with God. And at the end of the day, what we receive from our struggle is not what we were expecting. Instead, we get a better sense of who we are in relation to the world and to the divine. The past couple of weeks have been a struggle for me, and for many of the other staff members at Trinity. We are one of the many churches in the community where people can come to if they need help. We are equipped to help with rent, utilities, groceries, and gas. And this assistance all comes from the discretionary funds. And this is completely funded by gifts from you. 2 weeks ago, there was a sign on the door that read, "We are unable to give assistance at this time." And when we took down the sign, we got an idea of the need that is in this community, and it is immense in these hard economic times. More often than not, we see people come in with shut-off notices from the power company. And one of us will sit down and talk to the person in need. Not everyone that comes in needs the help that they claim that they need, but I suspect that most of the people that darken our doors are actually quite honest. We try to spend the discretionary fund wisely by avoiding dependent relationships, being quick to help those who want to help themselves, and we try to make our accountability better. And we provide information with those who come about services in the area that can help with more systemic issues that we are not equipped to handle. In the midst of these struggles, we also fight to establish our boundaries as we feel out how much time we are able to contribute in one day while still being able to do our other duties. We are not perfect at any of these things, but every day we get a little bit better. And with each case, we understand a little bit more where Trinity is called to assist and how we should move forward. We struggle with this because we believe doing this ministry and doing it with integrity is part of our call as Christians. I invite all of you to join this divine wrestling match as we struggle with our own identity and with our role in this community. You can help by giving directly to the discretionary fund or by volunteering your time and energy to work as we move forward. So back at seminary, a couple of students decided to stick with Alan for the long haul. In Alan's case, the key to making this work was to say no often, to abandon the overwhelming need to be nice, and to embrace the very difficult task of loving someone for who they are. Finding our boundaries was difficult, but once we got an idea of what we were realistically capable of doing, things began to go smoothly. I would personally only call Alan on Wednesdays and Sundays from 5 o'clock, and I still do this. He will call me on the dot, I promise. And I would take him out to dinner once a month, but I would not buy him junk. Considering his health problems, if he wants to eat with me, he's got to eat salad. Once I made these boundaries, Alan respected them, and our relationship deepened because of them. Alan felt secure that our relationship would not dissolve, and our conversation stopped being about what we were going to do next and started to become more about what Alan was doing on the day-to-day. From the beginning, we were careful not to foster dependency. Instead, we wanted to empower Alan to take care of himself. This instinct was good to have, but it ended up reflecting our own arrogance and inflated sense of self-worth in Alan's life. Alan did not need us as much as we had thought. One day he asked me to run errands with him, and I went to the bank and cardiologist's office with him. I was surprised to find that Alan did not only have big brothers at the seminary, he also had them at the bank. When we walked through the door, everyone knew him by name and were quick to help him get what he needed. When I asked the manager about Alan, she said that he calls and prays with them every day at 3:45 on the dot. Then we went to the doctor's office. There I saw more of the same. When we walked through the door, everyone stopped what they were doing to greet Alan. One of them even made a dish for his birthday, which was still a month away. Then it became abundantly clear that Alan did not need us in the way that we had thought. We were actually just a small fraction of the network that he had built up over the years to ensure that he could survive. From a young age, he must have realized that he could not fully survive on his own. He would always need someone to drive him, to help him with his bills, and most importantly, to help keep him company. As his parents got older, he reached out to people in his community, and usually people were quick to help. And in return, Alan would give them something in return. For new seminary students, he gave them an opportunity to feel like they were doing something good, whether they were or not. To others, especially those at the banks and doctor's offices, he offered them an opportunity to step out of their professional role and have a moment to pray. By the time that we graduated from seminary, Alan no longer felt controversial. We wrestled with our call to help Alan, and in the end, we became comfortable with the small role that we played. Part of the human condition is struggling with relationships, whether the relationship is with God, our family, friends, or even strangers. And part of our call as Christians is to dive into that relationship with courage and openness as to what we might discover about ourselves and about the people around us. For those of us who stuck with Alan at seminary, we were surprised to find how much of our own need to help and be useful motivated our ministry. Sticking with Alan gave us insight into our ministry. And that even though we were actually helping, we were never as important as we might have been led to believe. As we look forward in the life of Trinity, we also need to wrestle with how we do ministry and to constantly establish relationships with people in our greater community. We may find greater need than we have imagined in some areas and less so in others. But we can only discover this by diving into the messiness of the world and wrestling with the divine.